Uh, Hello students, my name is Assistant Professor Vaishali Sonone. Presently I am working in MVP's SVKT College, Devlali Camp. Today we are going to discuss on the topic Vibrio cholera. In our previous lecture, first let's see the recap what we have studied in our previous lecture. So in our previous lecture we have started with the organism Vibrio cholerae, and in that we have discussed about the morphological characteristics of Vibrio cholerae. Along with that we have also seen the classification which is associated with Vibrios, and followed up by that we have seen the cultural characteristics and the biochemical characteristics of Vibrio cholerae. Today's session agenda, let's have a look of today's agenda. Today what we are going to do is, what we are going to study is the mode of transmission of Vibrio cholera. So today we are going to discuss how Vibrio cholera is transmitted from one person to another. Then we are going to see the determinants of pathogenicity, means what are the various factors which helps this organism to increase its virulence and to increase the pathogenicity. Then we are going to move on to the pathogenesis of this particular organism, how this organism causes the infection, followed up by the symptoms, laboratory diagnosis and treatment and control of the cholera infection. So, today's learning objective is to study the pathogenicity of this particular Vibrio cholera associated with the symptoms, treatment and control of the infection that is caused by Vibrio cholera. So, let us begin with the mode of transmission of Vibrio cholera. Now, when we talk about Vibrio cholera, this Vibrio cholera is the organism which basically infects the gastrointestinal tract, and any infection which is associated with gastrointestinal tract is generally mode of transmission is by oral fecal route. So, when we talk about Vibrio cholera, human and water, contaminated water, these are the two main reservoir of Vibrio cholerae, and the transmission generally occurs by consumption or ingestion of contaminated food or water. Now, when we talk about infection rate, generally this particular infection occurs with a higher rate in the areas which has very poor water supply as well as poor sanitation. In those areas this particular infection is very prominent, and if we talk about the infectivity dose of Vibrio cholera is usually high, because Vibrios are very much sensitive to the secretions of your gastric or gastric juices or secretion of stomach. So, the organism get killed when it reaches to the stomach, and only when this organism along with food and water, when it enters inside the body of human being, only at that time the organism is able to reach to the intestine and to cause the infection. So, this is how the organism is transmitted. It generally transmits by contaminated food or water. Now, moving on to the determinants of pathogenicity, means what are the various factors that helps this organism to establish an infection or to cause an infection. The very important aspect of this organism, the very important determinant of pathogenicity of Vibrio cholera is the cholera toxin. This organism produces a toxin known as cholera toxin. This cholera toxin is proteinic in nature. It is protein which is very much heat liable, and it has a molecular weight of 85,600 kilodaltons. Now, if we see structurally as well as functionally, this cholera toxin is similar to that of your E. coli toxin. Right now, this CT is more or less similar to that of your ET, but the potency of cholera toxin is always high. It is very potent as compared to that of your toxin, enterotoxin, that is produced by E. coli. Now, moving on to the structure of toxin, this cholera toxin is comprises or it is formed of two subunit. One is A subunit and another one is B subunit. A subunit has two different subunits, A1 and A2, and B subunit has 5 copies of B subunit. So, first let us see the A subunit. A subunit, as the name indicates, A stands for the active subunit. This active subunit is actually responsible for the changes or the toxin activity or accumulation of fluid into the lumen. And this particular toxin has a molecular weight of 27,215 kilodalton, and as I told you that it comprises of two fragments, A1 fragment and A2 fragment. These A1 and A2 fragment are bind to each other with a disulfide bond. A1 fragment is the active fragment. If we see about the B subunit, they are 5 in number, and as far as molecular weight is concerned, it is 11,677 kilodalton, and this particular B subunit is necessary for binding of this toxin subunit to the intestinal cell lining or to the lining of lumen or to your receptor cell. This B subunit, it binds, it makes A subunit to enter, to bind to that particular target cell. Now, we'll see the function of cholera toxin. The cholera toxin is the one which generally leads to the severe case of cholera, which we all know. This cholera toxin, it inhibits the absorption capacity of intestine. We all know that intestine is known for absorption of nutrients, it is known for absorption of vitamins and all the nutrients from the food or from water, whatever is required, and it also absorbs salt ions, your any ions, chlorine ions from the intestine, and this absorption capacity, it is hampered by this toxin. This toxin activates the excretory chloride transport in the intestinal enterocytes, and because of this, what happens, eventually the cell loses the NaCl, sodium chloride, into the intestinal lumen, and along with that it also inhibits the absorption of sodium chloride, and because of that, what happened, the that particular part or intestine is get imbalance as far as osmosis is concerned, and therefore there is an ample amount of outpouring of fluid from the intestinal cell or enterocyte cells into the lumen, and that leads to accumulation of ample amount of water into the lumen, and that leads to diarrhea. Apart from that, this particular cholera toxin is also called as your permeability factor because it increases the skin capillary permeability. Apart from cholera toxin, there are different determinants of pathogenicity. Among them, one is your co-regulated pilus. This co-regulated pilus or pili, it generally plays important role in adherence of this organism to the intestinal cell lining. See, when we talk about intestine is internally lined by a mucous membrane, and this mucous membrane protects the intestine from different pathogens, and to overcome this, the pathogens generally have a different virulence factors. Pilus is the one of that factor which helps the organism to get stick to the intestinal cell lining. So this is one. Another one is your colonization factor or adhesion factor. Adhesion factor again helps this organism to get adhere to the intestinal cell lining. See, for establishment of any type of infection, it is very necessary that your organism should enter inside your body. Once the organism enters inside the body, the organism should remain there. It should adhere to that particular site of infection. Only then and then infection will occur. And all these determinants of pathogenicity, all these virulence factor helps the organism to establish a infection. Along with that, heme agglutination proteases. This is another proteases which are produced by Vibrio cholera, which is categorized under your determinants of pathogenicity. This enzyme, it was initially it was called as cholera lectin, and it has both activity. One is your agglutination and another one is your proteases activity. This enzyme, it splits the mucus and fibronectin as well as the subunits of cholera toxin, and along with that it also leads to inflammation of intestinal cell riling, and because of this all these two activities, this heme agglutination proteases help the vibrios to get released from the intestinal cell lining, right, and this release of vibrio again helps to spread the infection from in that particular intestinal tract. Then another determinant of pathogenicity is the flagella. So majority of your virulent organism, your pathogenic organism generally has a flagella as a virulence factor. So here again when we talk about Vibrio has a single polar flagella. This we have already seen in our previous lecture. This flagella, the role that is played by flagella is the motility. So if the organism is motile, then the organism is able to spread the infection more effectively as compared to that of your non-motile organism. So the flagella is the one. Another factor is your siderophores. Siderophores are also produced by vibrios, which helps in sequestration of iron. Then moving on to the pathogenesis of Vibrio cholera. When we talk about pathogenesis, it generally is going to give you a brief idea how the organism enters inside and how the organism causes the infection. So let's see the pathogenesis. So the very first step in the pathogenesis is ingestion of the organism. So when the organism enters, the main thing for any type of infection is that the organism should enter inside the body of host. So the organism is ingested and the infection begins. When the organism is ingested, then it travels the gastrointestinal tract, and as I told you previously that gastrointestinal tract or stomach, the secretion of stomach is inhibitory to that of your Vibrio cholera, and therefore few numbers of vibrios are able to pass through that particular barrier and they reaches to the intestine. Once the organism reaches to the intestine, it adheres to the intestinal lining with the help of adhesion factor or colonization factor or with the help of the pili, which we have seen. And after adhesion, the organism grows, it establishes there, it colonizes there, and then there is a production of cholera toxin. Now this cholera toxin is coded by the genome of this organism and it is produced. This cholera toxin, the A subunit, it enters in the cell and it activates the accumulation of adenyl cyclase enzyme system. Right, and when it activates the enzyme system, adenylase cyclase enzyme system, it leads to accumulation of cyclic AMP. Right, it results in accumulation of cyclic AMP. After accumulation of cyclic AMP, there is an inhibition of reabsorption of sodium, potassium and chloride ions. Right, and this wholly disturbs the osmotic balance of the intestine, and along with that there is a hyper secretion of chlorides and bicarbonates. All these things leads to net loss of sodium and potassium from the intestinal cell into the lumen, and it ultimately leads to accumulation of all these iron in the fluid, and that leads to the diarrhea. And the characteristic type of a stool that is formed in case of your cholera is ricey watery stool. Now the name ricey watery stool is given because this particular the stool of the patient suffering from cholera, it resembles as that of the washed away water of your rice. When we wash rice, generally the type of water which is formed, it resembles as that of that. It is creamish in color with a mucus and flakes similar to that of your rice water, and therefore it is named as ricey watery stool. Now moving on to the symptoms. Now, what are the basic symptoms of this particular organism infection? Now, when we talk about cholera, the infection generally symptoms appears after 2 to 3 days of consumption of this contaminated food or contaminated water. Watery diarrhea is generally the major symptom which is associated with cholera. See, this particular infection doesn't lead to severe case directly. Initially, the infection begins with a mild, what you can say, diarrhea. So it resembles similar to that of your diarrhea, and slowly and unexpectedly there is a shock of your cholera, and the person generally leads to massive diarrhea, watery diarrhea, which resembles to that of your ricey watery stool. Generally, the stool doesn't have a typical odor. It has a tinge of sweetish odor, and sometimes it may have a fishy odor, but generally it is sweetish odor. Along with that diarrhea, vomiting is also associated symptom with that of your cholera. There is a rapid heart rate. Along with that, there is loss of skin elasticity. Now, this loss of skin elasticity is only because of loss of ample amount of water. You can imagine in severe case, there near about 1 liter of water in the form of stool is thrown outside the body of that particular patient. So, you can imagine the severity of the infection. So, for 1 hour, if a person is losing near about 1 liter of water from his or her body, you can imagine the condition of that particular patient throughout the day. Means if you can calculate 24 hours, so it is going to give a huge loss, and if the cases is not treated, it can lead to the death of that particular patient. And therefore, any infection which is associated, either it is your cholera infection or any other infection where there is a loss of water from the body, either in the form of diarrhea or in the form of vomiting. So, water should be balanced, and the frequent frequent treatment should be given to avoid the severe conditions. So, because of water loss, there is a loss of elasticity of the skin. Along with that, there is a dryness generally occurs in the mouth. There is low blood pressure because there is what you can say saturation of blood takes place. Yeah, concentration of blood takes place because water molecules are removed from the body. Thirst is again one of the associated symptoms. Again, it is associated with loss of water, ample amount of water from the body. Then muscular cramp, it can occur. Restlessness, irritation in case of children, these are the common symptoms that are associated with this particular infection. Now, the stool, it is rich in bicarbonates and it has some protein. So, heme concentration occurs because of loss of ample amount of water. There is a condition hypokalemia. It is the condition where which occurs as a result of cholera. There is low potassium concentration into the blood, and this can lead to the nerval damage, or it can lead to neuromuscular and renal disorder, because potassium is essentially required for the proper functioning of these systems. Apart from all these major symptoms which we have just seen, there are some other symptoms that are associated with cholera infection. It can include abdominal pain, so cramps can take place. Along with that, it is also associated with rectal pain, because the patient who is suffering from severe case of cholera is generally pot bound. So, there is a continuous loss of water from the body in the form of stool. So, rectal pain is again one of the symptoms which is associated with that. Fever is sometimes associated. Along with that, severe vomiting is there. So, the person loses the water by both the ways, in the form of stool as well as in the form of vomits. So, there is ample amount of water loss, dehydration, no or low urine input. So, urination is it decreases massively. There is a weight loss, since our body contains 90% of your water. So, if ample amount of water is lost, so it leads to weight loss. And if the case is not treated, if the infection is not treated, it can lead to shock and death of the person. So these are the symptoms which are associated with cholera. Now let's move on to the laboratory diagnosis of cholera. How you can identify? See, on the basis of symptoms, you are able to have a just clue that this might be your cholera. But this you will get to know only when the person gets into severe condition. So before moving on to the severe condition, we need to identify the pathogen. So you need to just move on to the laboratory diagnosis. Let's see how we can diagnose this particular thing. The very first thing is for diagnosis is the sample, which sample we are going to use. So in case of cholera, we are going to use a stool sample, because stool sample contains ample amount of your bacteria. This organism doesn't enters into the circulatory system, so you can't take any other sample. So stool sample you can take. The very first thing which can be done is the microscopy. Now this organism has a characteristic feature. The organism is comma shaped. It has a polar flagella. It shows a vibratory movement, right? You can, and because of that, it is easily able, you can easily identify the organism by visualizing it under microscope. So you can, microscopy can be one way by which you can identify the organism in the sample. Apart from that, you can go for once the sample is you have taken a sample. Now if in generally E. coli, generally Vibrios are not able to survive for longer period of time outside the body, and the stool of a person doesn't contain Vibrio, but along with that it also contains other normal flora like your E. coli. And when the stool sample is taken, the organism, this sample is needed to transport to the transport media like Venkatraman Ramakrishnan media is there, alkaline salt water, alkaline salt water is there. So these media can be used for a transport media that we have already seen in our previous lecture. So this the sample which is collected, it can be directly transferred to the transport media, and that the media is designed in such a way which is able to help this organism to survive in that particular condition. So your normal flora will not overgrow your Vibrios, and you will be able to identify the Vibrios. So that sample you can go for culturing this organism on TCBS agar or bile salt agar. Then there are some tests, string test is there, cholera red reaction is there, agglutination test is there, serological test is there. So we will see one by one. So the organism is gelatinase positive, so you can go for a gelatinase test. Then this organism is oxidase positive, so oxidase test is the one which you can, the colonies which you get on TCBS agar, or the colonies which you get on nutrient agar, that colony, by using that colony you can go for gelatinase test, you can go for oxidase test. Along with that, you can also go for catalase test. The organism gives a catalase positive reaction. Then on media, on TCBS agar, the organism forms a yellow color colony. So in the image you can see the yellow color, and this formation of yellow color helps you to identify, clearly identify that the organism is your Vibrio cholera. Along with that, the organism gives what you can say a hemodigestion. So a clear zone is surrounded by a turbid zone. So on blood agar you can see such type of colonies. And a string test is one of the important laboratory diagnosis which help you to rapidly diagnose this particular organism. In string test, what is done, the colony which you get on TCBS agar or the colony which you get on nutrient agar, that you can confirm as Vibrio by just taking a loop full of that colony, mix it with 0.5% of sodium taurocholate. This leads to the digestion of cell and the DNA is released outside, and when you pick up that colony with the help of loop mixed with your sodium taurocholate, it leads to formation of string. So in this particular image you can see the formation of such string. So formation of such type of string is given by Vibrio cholera, and this string test is a rapid test which can be used for identification of your Vibrio or for laboratory diagnosis of Vibrio. Along with that, you can also go for cholera red reaction. This Vibrio has a tendency to produce indole when it is grown in peptone water, and along with that it has a characteristic to reduce nitrate to nitrite, and these two tests, combination of these two tests is generally used in cholera red reaction. When the organism is grown in nitrate peptone broth, the organism produces indole along with that of your nitrate, and when this few drops of H2SO4 is added to that, it leads to formation of a complex which is red in color, and therefore nitroso-indole complex is formed. So, the positive test is indicated by formation of red color. So, you can see in the image the formation of red color indicates a positive cholera red reaction, and this cholera red reaction can confirm that the infection or the organism which you have isolated is your Vibrio cholera. So, by all these biochemical tests you can easily able to identify, but along with that you can also go for serological analysis or serology, because for every infection some amount of antibodies are produced inside the body. So, you can go for antigen antibody reaction. So, serotyping of Vibrio cholera is done by generally by slide agglutination test by using antisera of Vibrio cholera O1 type. Okay, this serotype is generally used, and if the test comes positive, like if you have taken a serum sample and if you have mixed it with antisera of Vibrio cholera O1, and if it shows agglutination, it means the test is positive. Then you need to go for you need to again repeat it with a specific sera of Inaba and Ogawa serotypes. So, from there you can confirm whether it is because of Inaba or Ogawa. Now, once you are done with the laboratory diagnosis, the next thing which we are going to discuss is how we can treat the infection. Now, when we talk about the treatment for any, not only for Vibrio cholera, but any type of diarrheal infection is initially, or it should be preliminary treated with oral rehydration therapy. There is oral rehydration solution which is available in the market, which is an proper which contain a balanced of your electrolyte. It contains your sodium ions, it contains chlorine ions, it contains potassium. So, a proper balance of electrolyte is given, and that electrolyte powder or that particular electrolyte should be given to the patient to maintain the water level inside the body. Apart from that, antibiotics are used for the treatment of the infection. So, the antibiotics that are generally used for Vibrio cholera, it includes tetracycline, sulfonamides, ampicillin, kanamycin, streptomycin. Along with that, trimethoprim, tetracycline and doxycycline. These are the two antibiotics which is a drug of choice for adults. And when we talk about small kids, so for children, trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazoles, these can be used for the treatments. Now, how you can prevent and control this particular infection? Now, when we talk about cholera, generally previously near about 7 epidemics of cholera has occurred in worldwide in the country. And the one way of controlling this particular infection or preventing this particular infection is to maintain proper hygienic condition. Along with that, there should be a management of improved water supply, potable water supply. Okay, the water should be clean, it should be free of pathogens, proper sanitation conditions should be maintained. So, if water supply is and sanitation, if it is done effectively, then the occurrence of this infection can be reduced very effectively, and the control of this particular infection after the epidemics is done only by means of management of proper water supply and sanitation. Then along with that, improved personal hygiene is another aspect for controlling this particular infection. If a person is taking proper hygienic condition, then the organism, the infection can be control. Health education is another aspect which can help to prevent this particular infection, because everyone is not aware of how to maintain personal hygiene, yeah, how to maintain hygienic conditions. So this health education should be provided so that people will get to know what are the bad effect, or what are the negative effect of not properly maintaining the hygienic conditions. Then if we want to completely prevent this particular infection, so vaccines are always available there. So killed cholera vaccine is one of the vaccine which is available for treating cholera. This killed cholera vaccine, it contains a suspension of Vibrio cholera O1, right, and it contains equal proportion of Inaba and Ogawa strain. And this particular as far as immunity is concerned, yeah, protection is concerned, it is poor immunity is there with a low protection, and the immunity generally lasts for 3 to 6 months. Now in case of killed cholera vaccine, it contains a killed organism, and therefore the number of organism which you are making enter inside the body of host, yeah, into the body of human being is it remains one and the same, and therefore the immunity which is provided by this particular vaccine is low. Another type of vaccine which is used for controlling, yeah, to prevent this particular infection is non-living oral B subunit vaccine, whole cell vaccine. Now this vaccine, it is a combination of two things. One, it is the combination of Vibrio cholera O1 serotype. Along with that, it contains purified recombinant B subunit of toxoid, cholera toxoid, right. So it has a toxin component of toxoid, and it has a organism, heat killed whole organism, and it is found that this particular vaccine provides near about 80% of immunity. The third type of vaccine is live oral cholera vaccine. It consists of an attenuated strain of genetically modified strain of Vibrio cholera O1, and a single dose of this particular vaccines gives near about 95% of protection. Now when we talk about the vaccine, right, oral vaccine or live vaccine, the live vaccines are comparatively gives more protection, because what happened, the number of organisms which are entering inside your body, they multiply, they undergo multiplication for few cycles, and then they are destroyed themselves. And this, when there is an increase in number of antigens, so accordingly the antibodies are formed or immunity is provided. So live oral vaccines are always superior to that of your killed vaccines. So that's all with the Vibrio. So let's have a overlook of a summary what we have discussed in our today's lecture. So today we have discussed about the mode of transmission of Vibrio cholera, how this organism is transmitted from maybe contaminated water, contaminated food, or from one person to another. Then we have seen the pathogenesis. Then in the pathogenesis, we have also seen the various determinants of pathogenicity, followed up by the pathogenesis. Followed up by the pathogenesis, we have seen the symptoms that are associated with Vibrio cholera infection. So starting from mild symptom to the major symptom, we have seen the various symptoms of this particular organism. Then we have gone through the laboratory diagnosis of this particular organism. So how we can identify this particular organism. See, the infection which is generally caused by your Vibrio is a superficial one. The organism doesn't invade inside the cells. So we have seen the laboratory diagnosis. Then we have gone through the treatments. What are the various ways by which, various antibiotics which we can use to treat a infection. And lastly, we have seen the prevention and control, in that we have seen the different vaccines which are available against cholera infection. Now there is an assignment for all of you. There are two questions which you need to solve. First one is write a note on mode of action of cholera toxin. So how your cholera toxin works, how it causes accumulation of ample amount of fluid into the lumen. And second thing is, you are supposed to write down the various selective medias which you can use for culturing of Vibrio cholera. Let's have a recap of what we are going to see in our next lecture. So in the lecture series of your bacterial pathogen, the next pathogen which we will be discussing is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So in our next lecture, we will be discussing about the morphological characteristics of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. We are going to see the cultural characteristics, we are going to see the biochemical characteristics and the various virulence factors that are associated with your Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Thank you.